The camera opens with soft wedding music. Lights are shining across a big and beautiful wedding hall. Golden decorations hang from the ceiling. Tables are covered with white cloth, shining plates, and glasses full of drinks. Guests are laughing, talking, and enjoying the night. Everything looks perfect, everything looks happy, but slowly, the camera moves to one corner of the hall. There is one chair, one seat that is different from all the rest. The card on the seat is not like other names. It does not say guest or family. It does not say friend of the bride. Instead, written in bold letters, it says, single mother waitress. A young woman sits down in that chair. She wears a simple dress, not as fancy as the others. Her face is beautiful, but her eyes look tired. She looks down, trying to hide. Around her, people whisper and laugh. Some cover their mouths. Some point at her. Others shake their heads, the sound of laughter grows louder. Then, the mother-in-law of the bride steps closer. She is dressed in gold, with heavy jewelry and a proud smile. She looks at the young woman and says loudly so everyone can hear, tonight's special guest. The single mother waitress. A used product. The words cut through the air like a knife. The entire hall bursts into cruel laughter. Glasses shake on the tables as people clap and laugh. Even the bride on stage tries to smile, though her eyes show discomfort. The young woman lowers her head. Her hands tremble as she holds her small purse. Her face burns with shame. She wants to disappear. She feels every pair of eyes looking at her, judging her, laughing at her pain. The music of the wedding continues, but inside her heart, silence grows louder. She remembers every sacrifice she made, every hard night, every struggle. But tonight, she feels smaller than ever. At that moment, her little boy sits next to her. He is only 8 years old, wearing a small suit that looks a little too big for him. But his eyes are sharp. He sees everything. He hears every cruel laugh. He sees the pain on his mother's face. The boy's hands tighten into fists under the table. His jaw clenches. His small chest rises and falls with heavy breaths. He may be young, but he understands one thing very clearly. The world is mocking his mother. The woman touches her son's shoulder softly, trying to calm him. She whispers, "It's okay. Just stay quiet." Her voice is soft but broken. She tries to hide her tears, but the boy does not relax. His eyes move from the cruel guest to the proud mother-in-law, then back to his mother's face. Inside him, something is burning, something is building. The hall is full of joy for everyone else, but for this mother and son, the wedding feels like a battlefield, and in that moment, as the laughter around them grows louder, the boy makes a silent promise. A promise that no one in this hall is ready for. The narrator's voice closes part 1. They thought she would stay silent. They thought shame would break her. But they forgot one thing. A mother may bend, but a son will rise. The wedding hall sparkled with lights, but for the young woman, the world felt dark. She sat frozen in her chair, her head bowed, her heart heavy. Around her, the sound of laughter mixed with clinking glasses and cheerful music. To the guests, it was just another joke. To her, it was a scar that cut deeper than words could explain. She lifted her eyes for a moment and saw the bride on stage. The bride's smile looked perfect, painted for the cameras, but her eyes shifted quickly away. No one wanted to stand by her. No one wanted to challenge the cruel laughter of the mother-in-law. The woman tried to hold her tears back, forcing herself to stay calm. She straightened her dress, picked up her fork, and pretended to eat. But every bite felt like a stone in her throat. The whispers around her never stopped. She should not even be here. A single mother, shameful. What kind of woman is she? Each whisper stabbed her again and again. She placed her fork down and folded her hands in her lap. She told herself, "Don't cry. Don't give them the satisfaction." But beside her, the boy was not as patient. He sat in silence, but his little fists pressed hard against the tablecloth. His small body was stiff with anger. He looked around the hall with sharp eyes, memorizing every face that had laughed at his mother. The woman noticed. She leaned toward him and whispered, "It's okay, my love. Ignore them. Just be strong." Her voice shook, but she forced a smile for him. She wanted to protect him from this cruelty. The boy turned his face toward her. For a moment, he studied her trembling lips and the sadness in her eyes. He hated it. He hated how she was treated. He hated how no one cared. His jaw tightened, and he sat back in his chair, but his silence was not weakness, it was the silence of a storm before it breaks. The hall glittered with joy. Guests clapped for the bride. Music rose higher. Waiters moved between tables carrying drinks. Everything seemed normal again. But deep inside one child's heart, nothing was normal. The boy's eyes returned to the stage. He saw the microphone standing tall, waiting for the next speech. He saw the guests, still smiling, still mocking in whispers. And then he looked again at his mother, her hands shaking, her shoulders bent, her head lowered, and he made a choice. Slowly, quietly, he pushed his chair back. The sound was small, but to his mother, it felt like thunder. She turned quickly, her eyes wide. "Where are you going?" she whispered, but the boy did not answer. He stood tall, his little suit slightly loose, his face filled with determination far beyond his years. He looked straight ahead, his steps slow but steady. The guests began to notice. Heads turned. Conversations stopped. The music seemed to fade. One by one, all eyes followed the little boy walking across the hall, the mother's breath caught in her throat. She reached out her hand, but he was already too far. She could only whisper his name, her voice lost in the heavy silence that was falling over the room, and then the narrator's voice broke through. They silenced the mother. But the son was ready to speak. The hall was full of golden lights, but now silence began to creep in. All the guests slowly turned their eyes to the little boy. His footsteps were soft, but in that moment, they sounded louder than the wedding music. Every step carried a weight far bigger than his small body that he walked past men in black suits and women in shiny dresses. Their smiles faded as they watched him. Some raised eyebrows, some whispered, but nobody stopped him. The boy's eyes never moved away from the stage. At his table, the young woman's heart beat fast. Her hands shook as she tried to stand, but her legs felt weak. She whispered again, "Please, come back. Don't do this." But her voice was too soft. The boy was already too far to hear. The bride on stage paused mid-sentence. Her smile froze as she noticed the child walking toward her. The mother-in-law frowned, confused. Guests leaned closer to each other, whispering, "What is he doing? Why is he going to the stage? Does he think this is a game?" The boy reached the stairs leading up to the microphone. His small hand touched the rail, and he climbed with steady steps. His suit sleeves hung loosely from his arms, but his back was straight like a soldier. The music stopped. The band fell silent, waiting. The hall that had once been full of cruel laughter now stood frozen, every eye locked on the boy. That he reached the top, his head barely reaching the microphone. He stood still for a moment, looking at the crowd. His chest rose and fell with heavy breaths, but his eyes were clear, sharp, and burning with something the guests did not expect, courage. The bride bent down slightly, whispering with a forced smile, "Sweetheart, you must go back to your seat. This is not the time." But the boy did not move. He wrapped his small hand around the microphone, holding it tightly. His knuckles turned white from the grip. The hall waited. The young woman covered her mouth with her hand, tears filling her eyes. Fear and pride battled inside her heart. She wanted to protect him, but deep inside she knew this was his moment. The mother-in-law leaned forward in her chair, angry and curious at the same time. She wanted to laugh again, but something in the boy's stillness stopped her. The boy closed his eyes for a second, as if gathering every bit of strength. When he opened them again, he spoke in a clear voice that surprised everyone. "I want to say something." His words were simple, but they echoed across the hall. No one laughed. No one clapped. The silence was so heavy that even the sound of glasses on tables seemed too loud. He looked at the bride. Then he looked at the crowd. Finally, his eyes found his mother, who sat trembling in the corner, and the narrator's voice whispered the hall had mocked a mother. But now, her son was ready to speak for her. And nothing could silence him. The boy's small fingers gripped the microphone so tightly that his knuckles turned pale. The hall was silent, waiting. Hundreds of eyes stared at him, but he did not look away. His chest rose and fell, and in his heart, one thought echoed again and again, I must speak. The bride bent forward, forcing a nervous smile. Sweetheart, you should go back to your mother, she whispered, her voice sweet but shaky. But the boy shook his head. His voice, though small, carried strength that filled the hall. I have a gift for the bride, he said. The words dropped into the silence like stones into still water. For a moment, the crowd froze. Then came the whispers, a gift? From a child? What could he have? This must be a joke. The mother-in-law laughed loudly, breaking the tension. Oh, how cute! The boy wants to play games at a wedding, she mocked. A few guests chuckled with her, but the boy's eyes did not move. He stood firm. He waited for the laughter to fade. Then he spoke again, his voice stronger this time. My gift is not in my hands, he said. He paused, his eyes scanning the hall. My gift is in my life. And that gift is my mother. The laughter stopped. The mocking smiles vanished. The air grew heavy, so heavy that even the chandeliers seemed to hold their breath. The young woman at the corner gasped, covering her mouth with trembling fingers. Tears filled her eyes, but they did not fall. Not yet, the boy's voice grew steady, each word like a knife cutting through the silence. She gave me everything when she had nothing. She worked hard when everyone left her. She stood strong when the world pushed her down. She is not just a single mother, she is my hero. Gasps spread across the hall. Some guests lowered their eyes, unable to meet his gaze. Others shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The bride's face turned pale, her smile gone completely. The mother-in-law's eyes widened, her lips pressed tight, no laughter left. The boy held the microphone closer, his small figure standing taller than anyone in that hall. His words carried the weight of truth, a truth that no one could ignore. You laugh at her. You call her names. But without her, I would not be here today. Without her, I would not have food, or clothes, or life. She gave me everything. And she never asked for anything back. The hall stayed frozen. Not one sound. Not one whisper. The boy's voice had stolen every breath that ate the back of the hall. The young woman finally let a tear fall. It ran down her cheek, shining in the light. But this tear was not only pain. It was pride. Pride that her son had given her a voice she could not use. And then, the narrator's voice broke the silence. They thought a child could be ignored. They thought his words would be small. But in that hall, his truth was louder than every laugh, stronger than every insult. The boy's small voice filled the hall, but the weight of his words felt heavier than thunder. The silence was thick. No one dared to laugh now. No one dared to move. The boy's eyes burned with honesty, and his next words struck deeper than any insult could. My mother, he said, pointing gently toward the woman sitting alone, worked when she was tired. She carried me in her arms when no one else wanted us. She stayed awake hungry so that I could eat. She cried in secret, but she smiled for me. She gave me everything, and she never gave up. The young woman shook her head softly, tears running down her cheeks. She had never spoken these truths aloud. But here they were, coming from her son, raw and sharp, cutting through the cruelty of the room. The guests shifted in their chairs. Some covered their mouths. Some looked away, ashamed of the laughter they had joined in earlier. Even the waiters stopped walking, holding their trays in still hands, their eyes fixed on the boy. The bride's face turned stiff. She bit her lip, trying to keep her mask of joy, but the boy's words hit her harder than she expected. The smile that had won the hall now looked fake and fragile. The mother-in-law clenched her fists on her lap. Her eyes narrowed, her body stiff with anger. But even she could not find words. The boy's voice was too clear, too honest. Any word she spoke now would sound weak. The boy took a deep breath and continued. His little hands shook, but his voice did not. You call her weak, he said, looking directly at the mother-in-law, but she is stronger than anyone here. You call her useless, but she is the reason I live, the reason I stand. You think she is nothing, but to me, she is everything. The words echoed in the golden hall. The chandeliers sparkled as if even the lights wanted to honor him. The boy's small frame stood firm, but his spirit towered above Very one. The young woman buried her face in her hands. She could no longer hold back her sobs. But these were not sobs of shame anymore. These were tears of pride, tears of release. The guests felt the shift. The cruel whispers they had once shared now tasted bitter on their tongues. Some women wiped their eyes. Some men lowered their heads. The sound of chairs creaking filled the silence as people shifted uncomfortably under the weight of truth. The bride looked down at her wedding gown, unable to meet the boy's eyes. For the first time, the perfect white dress felt heavy, and her celebration felt hollow. And the mother-in-law? Her face turned red with fury. But inside her heart, even she knew, the hall no longer belonged to her. The boy's words had stolen it away. The narrator's voice cut through the stillness. Cruelty can fill a room. Laughter can wound like knives. But the truth of a child, pure, unbroken, unstoppable, can silence an entire crowd. For a long moment, the hall was silent. The boy's words still floated in the air, heavy and unforgettable. The chandeliers glowed above, the golden lights reflecting off faces that now carried shame instead of laughter. Then, slowly, a sound broke the silence. Clap. One single clap from the back of the hall. A man in a dark suit, his face serious, raised his hands again. Clap! Clap! The sound echoed. Another guest joined. Then another. And soon, the silence cracked open as applause spread like fire across the room. Hands that once pointed in mockery now came together in respect. The cruel whispers were gone. The sound of clapping filled the hall, louder, stronger, until it drowned out everything else. The young woman looked up in shock. Tears glistened on her cheeks, but now they mixed with disbelief. She had entered this hall with shame burning in her chest, and now the same hall stood applauding her son, applauding her. The boy stood tall, still gripping the microphone. He didn't smile. He didn't bow. His face stayed firm, serious, almost older than his years. He wasn't looking for praise. He was looking for justice. And in that moment, he had found it. Some guests wiped their eyes. Others looked down at their plates, unable to face the mother whose pain they had laughed at minutes ago. The shift in the air was powerful, impossible to ignore. The bride lowered her bouquet, her hands trembling. The applause that should have been hers now belonged to someone else. Her big day, her perfect stage, was no longer hers alone. The spotlight had moved. The mother-in-law sat frozen. Her lips pressed into a thin line. Her fingers clutched her jewelry, but no words left her mouth. She wanted to shout, to dismiss, to laugh again, but the room had turned against her. Her authority had cracked, and she could feel it. The boy stepped away from the microphone and walked down the stairs. The clapping grew even louder. Some guests even stood, giving him the kind of respect usually reserved for heroes. When he reached his table, his mother rose to her feet. She looked at him with eyes full of tears, her lips trembling, unable to speak. The boy walked into her arms and hugged her tightly. She bent down, holding him close, as if he were her whole world. The applause didn't stop. It grew louder, rolling through the hall like thunder. The people who once mocked now honored. The same voices that had whispered poison now cheered for truth, and in that storm of clapping hands, the narrator's voice rose. They wanted her silence. They wanted her shame. But a child's courage turned the tide. The hall that once laughed at a mother now bowed to her strength. And those who insulted her learned the truth can change everything. The applause carried on, as if the hall itself wanted to erase the cruelty that had been spoken. But though the sound was healing, one face still burned with anger. The mother-in-law sat stiff, her eyes cold, her pride shattered, and the narrator closed the part with suspense. The crowd had changed. The hall had changed. But one heart refused to bend. And in her silence, Karma was already waiting. The applause still shook the wedding hall. Guests clapped until their palms turned red, their voices rising in cheers. But in the middle of all this noise, one figure sat in silence. The mother-in-law's smile was gone. Her proud face had twisted into a mask of anger, her eyes moved from the boy to his mother, burning with disbelief. How could this woman, the one she mocked, now stand taller than her? How could this child silence an entire hall? The young woman slowly sat back down, still holding her son close. Her tears fell freely now, but they were no longer tears of shame. They were tears of pride, of victory. She kissed the boy's forehead and whispered, "You are my strength." He hugged her tighter, his small arms wrapping around her as if he were protecting her from the whole world. Around them, the guests began to talk again, but this time, their voices were different. "She raised a brave child. She suffered, but look how strong she is. We judged too quickly, she deserves respect." Every word was a soft apology, though no one said it to her face. But she didn't need their words anymore. The sound of their applause had already spoken louder than anything else out on the stage. The bride stood frozen. The flowers in her hands trembled. Her perfect day had shifted into something else, something she did not plan for. The applause that should have been hers now belonged to the woman she had ignored. The celebration that was supposed to show her beauty now showed another woman's strength, and that truth stung more than any insult. The mother-in-law clenched her fists tighter, her rings digging into her skin. She tried to force a smile, but her lips refused to move. She wanted to speak, to regain control, to remind everyone that this was her family's wedding. But she couldn't. No voice came. No word could erase what had already been said. Her silence was her defeat. The young woman looked across the hall. She no longer felt small. She no longer felt like a shadow. With her son by her side, she felt taller than the chandeliers, stronger than the walls of that hall. For the first time, she breathed freely. The boy sat back in his chair, his face calm. He had not shouted, he had not fought, yet he had won. He had given his mother the respect she deserved, and no one could take it away. The guests began to rise, some walking over to greet the woman, to shake her hand, to nod with respect. The same people who once whispered now bowed their heads. The hall had changed. The air had changed, but the mother-in-law stayed seated, her pride shattered. Her silence was louder than any words, and the narrator's voice closed the story. They laughed at her. They mocked her. They called her names. But in the end, it was not cruelty they remembered. It was courage. A mother's pain became her son's strength. And on that night, Karma walked silently through the hall, leaving shame where it was deserved, and honor where it was earned. The camera faded on the boy hugging his mother, the applause still rolling like thunder, and the proud faces of the cruel now lowered in defeat.